ITC uh, in Bangalore for a short duration, and maths is an optional. So I'll pass on the mic to Surbhi. She'll discuss her strategy at various stages of the examination. And we'll try to keep the questions towards the later part of the session once she explains her strategy. So I think what we will be trying to cover is the strategy for prelims, mains, within mains, GS optional and essay, and also strategy for interview, right? So Surbhi, you can have the mic, right? Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So first of all, I'll share a brief roadmap for prelims. I could share my book sources initially. So I followed very standard sources. I followed model spectrum for modern history. Polity ke liye I followed Lakshmikant. Then I followed the 4 NCRTs of 11th and 12th for geography. For economy, I followed Nunal sir's PDFs. I bought those PDFs from the market and I read those PDFs entirely for economy. For environment, I read Shankar's green book for environment and ecology. Other than this, most of my sources were dynamic for subjects like social issues, international relations, governance. I did not follow any specific book. I followed current affairs and I supplemented those current affairs with my own notes, which I made by Googling various sources, by referring to the themes that were being repeated in previous year's questions in both prelims as well as mains. So no extra books for these supplementary topics. I prepared my own notes. For ethics, my initial base was Vajiram's notes, and over that it was mostly answer writing. I would read toppers' copies. I would internalize the demand of these questions, what was being rewarded. So by doing this reverse engineering only, mostly I did ethics. For this year, I read Mudit Jain sir's Decode Ethics book, which I did find useful to a large extent. So that could also be followed for ethics. For essay, again, it was mostly practicing essays. I had joined a test series and I would just practice essays on various topics, and based on the feedback that I would receive, I would then improve upon. And I would brainstorm for some common topics like education, healthcare. For these topics, I would prepare some further material. For instance, a very good story to start an essay on education. So some of these notes I had prepared for myself, and this was it for essay, no sources. For means, I believe, so I could clear prelims in my first attempt, and then I could mostly clear prelims in every attempt. Means was a major pain point throughout my journey. This was my 4th attempt in which I cleared the exam, and I had not secured any rank in any of my previous attempts. So I think the major change that I made in my journey was that I started practicing answer writing. So in my previous attempts, I would read a lot and I would somehow think that whatever I'm reading will get absorbed and reflected in my answers. But this was not the case. Whatever we read is generally not reflected if we've not practiced enough, because we are just given 7 minutes to write a 10 marker and 11 minutes to write a 15 marker. Within that time, we have to read the question, think about the points, brainstorm, and then write the answer in entirety. So if we haven't practiced sufficiently, however much content we may read, it will not reflect in the answers. So I think this was a major learning for me from the marks I had received in my previous means, because I had probably prepared extensive notes for most of the topics like social issues, disaster management. I had read extensively, I had written tests, but those were not reflected in my marks in my previous attempt. In this attempt, I did very little reading for GS, and I just built on the reading I had done in all my previous attempts by practicing all of those points that I'd read. And that is where I think I could cross a certain threshold that I needed to cross for GS. And similarly for maths, my option was mathematics. I was reading a lot in mathematics in my previous 3 attempts, but I wasn't practicing. And because I wasn't practicing in my last year's paper, I did a lot of calculation mistakes and I only scored 195, combining both the papers. It was a major shock for me. But again, what I realized was that I had read a lot, I had revised a lot, but since I had not practiced any questions, the examiner is not going to read my mind. They're only going to see what's written in the paper. And if there are a lot of calculation mistakes or I'm not able to complete on time, I will not be rewarded no matter how much I read. So this time, even for maths, the only thing that I changed was I practiced a lot of papers. I practiced almost half a paper every day in the 90 days that we had for this means. And this was the only major change that I brought about in this attempt. So I think that's all I had to say.
That was pretty quick. I'll ask some questions around here, right? So, you said one of the things that you did from last year to this year was writing extensively. Did you update your notes as a part of this process?
Yes, sir, I did, but not a lot. So whenever I would, so I did not read any extra major sources this time. I majorly did this that I would practice. So I had joined two test series. One was Shankar and one was Vision. So I would write Shankar tests as 3-hour tests every weekend. And Vision test series, I would split the test paper, the 3-hour test paper into 3 1-hour slots. And I would practice these answers every day. And then I would, the same day, I would read the model answers and I would add points from these answers in my notes. I think other than this, I did not read any major notes this time. So,
how many answers would you have written combined, Vision, Shankar, all put together for GS?
Yes, sir. So even before prelims, I had joined the mains mini test series that Shankar had launched. So I think combined, I would have written around more than 30 full-length GS tests, which would come to about 600 answers.
Right. So, what was your approach after you write a test? Do you go back to these test papers and do you analyze them?
Yes, sir. So there were sometimes when I could not, but most of the times I would come back to these model answers that I would have. I would also see some of the toppers' answers. Then I would try to make my answers more crisp, and I would try to value add to my answers. For instance, in every test, there were at least 2 to 3 answers which were very new to me and which I hadn't read before. So specifically for these answers, I would go through the model answers, do some research, and update my notes for these topics. And for every other answer for which I had my own notes, I would still add some data points, some committee name, or some valuation that I found in these model answers.
We had Avinash here yesterday, and one of the things he said that he knew 20 out of 20 questions in paper 2, 16 out of 20 questions in paper 3. How was your experience? How much of the questions were you familiar with?
Sir, I think for paper 2, I was familiar with most of the answers. I probably 20 out of 20. For GS3 this year, some of the questions were extremely technical. So I would say I probably knew 17 out of 20 in GS3.
LED, you would have not known. S400.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
sir.
Price question and maybe one more, right?
WHO guidelines.
Kind of question. Paper 1.
So paper 1 also, mostly I knew almost every answer. There were some questions for which I did not have very specific points, but general answers I knew for almost every question. I had practiced all of these questions somewhere or the other in my test papers or my answer writing.
So these 600 answers really help you to bring together content for these questions.
Yes, sir, definitely. In fact, I think for this particular attempt, I did nothing for GS other than writing these 600 answers. There was some value addition here and there, but these answers were more or less all I did for GS, because maths I realized was my major weak point, and I gave my entire time to maths this time. And for GS, practicing these answers was the only thing that helped me cross that barrier of 370, 380 marks.
Among your GS papers, I think the most highest scoring is ethics, 117 you have scored, and which is a good score this year. How has your strategy for ethics been? How has it changed compared to previous year, or it's the same?
So for ethics, my strategy was more or less the same. I've been scoring good marks in ethics throughout my mains papers in all the attempts. But in my last 2 attempts, I was not able to complete the paper. I would leave one case study in ethics, because of which I would get 7 to 8 marks lesser as compared to this time. So I believe time management was the only thing that changed in ethics this time. But the way I wrote my answers or everything else was the same for ethics.
So do you start with case studies or do you start with part A?
So I always start with part A. So I would complete all the questions in part A first and only then move to case studies. But I was a little strict this time, that if within the stipulated time I'm not able to complete a particular question of part A, I would just write the conclusion and move on, because my case study suffered last year because of this. So this time I was more strict with my time management. In fact, you were the one who had suggested me to do this in my test series. So that is what I practice in the final paper.
So, using of examples in case study, ethics is a very important factor in scoring in ethics. What kind of examples were you using in your answers?
Sir, they were a mix of real life examples as well as examples of major personalities. So, sir, I do have a reading habit. I keep reading books in my free time. So I've read this Gandhiji's autobiography, and I've also read many books on development economics. So that somewhere helped me. I had many examples of various countries doing something differently, or a personality doing something differently. So those examples came in handy for ethics. And other than that, I tried to quote some personal examples in some of the questions.
Reading developmental economics is also your hobby, which you submitted in the DAF, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, introductions and conclusions in case studies and part A. How was your approach in ethics?
Sir, there was a topper. I think it was Vishakha Yadav, who had scored 160 in ethics last year. So I read her introductions for case studies, and I realized that she was introducing with a real life data. So earlier, I used to introduce my case studies with a generic definition or a generic description of the case. But this time, I adopted her strategy, and I used, so for example, if there's a case study on COVID, I will introduce by writing the impact that COVID has created to this world. And then I would start with introducing my case study and so on. And in the conclusion, I would generally write a very positive conclusion. I would, if I had a quote, I would end with a quote, or I would write some ethics keywords that the entire approach should be guided with integrity and compassion. So I would end with some positive note in most of the case studies.
What about case studies? What was your approach for case studies?
Sir, my approach was I would do a stakeholder analysis in most of the case studies. So, sir, it was very natural in the sense that whenever I would read a case study, I did not follow a set pattern about how to go about the case study. I would just think about what I would have done in this case, and I would fit in some ethics keywords to make the answer more beautiful. So I would follow a very natural approach. I would generally break it down into short-term, medium-term, and long-term approach. And then I would write the natural points that I could think of. I would just beautify those points with writing some keywords in between, like humanity, compassion, and communitarianism. Yes.
Okay. Moving on from paper 4 to paper 3, I think that's one paper where a lot of people are finding it difficult to score. And
Yes.
what would your suggestions be with respect to paper 3?
So with respect to paper 3, I think that both environment and economy are becoming dynamic. So they are not coming from standard sources. So our approach should be similar. We should read the newspaper daily. I think reading the newspaper for mains is very crucial. So the even if you're not making notes from those newspapers, the analytical, I think most of the articles are somewhere rooted in the country's economy. So reading the newspaper is very crucial for paper 3 because we develop an analytical capability to analyze whatever is going on in the economy or with respect to the environment, the steps that the government is taking, whether they are good or not. So a general analytical capability through the newspapers substantiated with data points and facts that we collect for ourselves. So from these newspapers, from some current affairs, magazines, from other static sources. So I think for GS3 specifically, we need our own notes, sir, because yes, sir.
Did you make notes for GS3?
Yes, sir. I had made notes for most of the themes in GS3.
How concise was it? How many revisions were you able to make with those notes?
So they were not very concise because I had prepared notes for prelims and mains combined. So there were some irrelevant points in those notes. There were some main specific points. But since I was making those notes on my own, I did have this ability to identify the relevant points for main. So I was able to revise through them quickly. So they look very bulky, but since I made them on my own, I was able to go through them quickly.
Okay. Paper 2 polity. I think that's one of the papers which you have also scored reasonably well. You 107 in that paper, right? How much improvement were you able to make from last year to this year in paper two?
So if I remember correctly, my score was in 90s last year in paper two. So more than 10 marks improved in this attempt. So one was again time management. In last means I had left 1 to 1.5 question in every paper. So that cost me around 4 to 5 marks in every paper. So time management was one thing. Other than that, sir, as I said, that most of the reading that is involved for mains was done in my previous attempt. This attempt was mostly internalizing that reading and putting that reading out in my answers through practicing. So, sir, I had made notes for most of the themes. Like I had a separate note for federalism. Within this, I had written 2 or 3 committees, their recommendations, then some prominent cases between states that reflect a positive trend towards federalism, some center state issues, some specific court cases. So for most of the themes that are written in the syllabus of polity, I had prepared notes like this: committees, data points, some pros, some cons for elections. So this time it was just putting those points out in my answers through more practice.
I think that's the most important factor. A lot of people have notes, but what is in their notes is not in their answers. So I
Yes, sir.
think ensuring what is in your notes and your answers is a very difficult task, in fact. Right?
Yes, sir.
How was your approach to current affairs? I believe you did a self-study and did newspapers and made notes out of it. Or did you try anything else?
So mostly I would follow Vision ISS current affairs magazines for current affairs. So mains 365 and PT 365. So I would not read them word by word. Prelims I would read word by word because prelims is very factual. For mains, I would just quickly go through the magazine and add points to my notes. So if there was a new theme, I would.
Relevant from the vision material to your notes. That's how it was done.
Yes, sir.
Right? Because as such, it is a little bulky. You can't revise it a lot of time in the original format.
Yes, sir.
Right. So moving from this essay, I don't know whether it has worked out really well for you because I don't think
Yes, sir.
improvement or a dip over the previous attempt.
So actually, it didn't. In my very first attempt, I had not practiced even a single essay, and I secured 132 in that attempt. In the second as well as third means I had practiced more essays, but both the times I scored around 120. This time it was 123. Last time also it was similar.
What was the
So,
topic this year?
sorry, sir.
Topics that you chose this year.
Yes, sir. Sir, one topic was hand that rocks the cradle rules the world in section B. Section 1, sir, I don't remember the topics.
Okay. Now, moving on from essay and GS, I think the subject that got you into service is mathematics. I think it's fair to say that because you have scored 295 marks, uh, 295, right? Which is
296.
which is one of the highest scores in mathematics. How has your approach towards mathematics changed in the last 3 attempts?
Yes, sir. So during my first main, sir, I secured around 185 in mathematics, but that was the attempt when I had just completed around 50 to 60% of the syllabus for maths. So even these many marks were a shock to me because I wasn't thorough with the syllabus. So for my second means, 190, I scored 195, and that came as a big surprise to me because for this time I had read the math syllabus in entirety and I had revised it at least 4 to 5 times. So between my first and second mains, there was a lot of effort towards maths, but only a 10-mark increase. So, sir, it was extremely disappointing, disheartening, and I probably felt that there's something extremely and majorly wrong with my math strategy because my effort is not being reflected. So, sir, the major change that I realized that I had practiced a lot, as in I had read a lot, and I did know the entire theory for maths. But since I had not practiced it, whenever I saw the question in the question paper during the exam, I did not have the time to reach the solution in entirety. So I had less time to complete a question because I had not practiced at all. I also did a lot of calculation mistakes because of the same reason that I had not practiced. So I identified that mistake, and for this attempt, sir, my major focus was practicing. whether or not I have revised a chapter, I would give a test at one specific time during the day. So I had fixed the time slot for giving a mathematics test, and I would attempt half a test daily, sir, without fail.
That's every day. Half
Yes,
test.
sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So,
Um,
sir, it was this practice, and for maths, it is generally seen that questions are repeated after a while. If you're able to solve 3 to 4 years mock test papers of an institute, 70 to 80% questions will come from that. So it is also so we should not just blindly read everything that there is for this exam because we should do smart work. So I think that also changed from last attempt to this one. Last attempt, I was reading everything without even realizing the importance of whatever I'm reading. In this attempt, sir, I was more smart. I identified that this is what is going to reward me. So I usually have this FOMO of missing out on something. So even if I'm missing one chapter in the syllabus, I'm not able to stay with the fact that I've missed the chapter. So this time I did make my peace with reading less and practicing more and do the smart work. So that is also, I think, what helped.
Surprised by your score, or were you expecting more than this?
So I was expecting more. I think so. I think I did a lot of cuttings in mathematics. So there was a difference of 15 to 20 marks between what I was expecting and what I scored. I was expecting around 320 in maths.
Okay. I don't think any other optional people can say this confidently that I was expecting 320. Right? I think that's only what max people can say. Right. Now, I think one of the factors that I found that you had additionally was that you had a lot of alumni to support you. Be it Varun, be it Jayant. I think more about this because I've heard a lot of people from whom you have, taken guidance or mentorship, right?
Yes, sir. So that was also a change I very consciously made from my previous attempts to this one. So during my previous attempts, I usually stayed in this false notion that I know everything that is needed to be done for this exam, and I just have to do that, and I'll get through. But probably people who've already cleared this exam have done a number of iterations. They failed in some and they succeeded in some. So talking to them helps us avoid the mistakes that they have done in this exam. So that helps. So Varun sir, he was all in the rank 7 in civil services.
Ranked thrice, I think. He
Yes,
has
sir.
three times, if I'm not wrong. He went from 400 to 200 to
Yes,
7,
sir.
like that, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, sir, my first attempt, I cleared prelims. My second attempt, sir, I failed in prelims. And then third and fourth, I cleared prelims, but could not clear means. So, sir, the second attempt was the lowest phase in my entire journey because I cleared prelims in the first attempt and then I failed the second time. So, I thought I'm going downhill and I probably am doing something very wrong in my journey. So, that was when I approached Varun, sir, and he was extremely kind to give me time and support. So what I did was initially I wasn't seeking any guidance. I would just share my plans with him and request him to keep accountability for those plans with me. So sir, that somewhere boosted my confidence in the sense that somebody who's already cleared the exam and has scored a rank is a part of my journey to some extent. So the entire year after I had failed prelims, I tried to do this, and so that just helped me stay afloat in the journey because I had a year staring at me. The third prelim was to come next year. So this was the year that I really worked hard on maths because I had not got the time to study for maths before this. So this entire year I really worked hard on maths, and this was the year I read extensively, but this did not reflect in my third attempt because I had not practiced at all. So this strategy also I changed by talking to Varun sir, to Giant, and to Ravi Teja Katta. These were the three people I mostly was in touch with. So they advised that I practice more than I read this time, and that is how it helps. So.
And I think even joining Shankar IAS was suggested by Varun, if I'm not wrong. Varun was the
Yes,
one,
sir.
my reference as well, right?
Yes, sir. Well,
So you're the first person from your family to get into service.
yes, sir.
How does that feel? How is the family taking this?
So my family is extremely happy. In fact, they're more happy than I am. I'm just relieved that I don't have to repeat to the cycle and that I get to do something new now. I get to work the way I want to now. So that is my feeling. But my family is definitely very happy.
You don't have to read Hindu editorials and
Yes.
explain in Indian Express. I think all
Yes,
that.
sir. Yes, sir.
Interview is another phase. I think this was the first interview also for you.
Yes,
How
sir.
preparation for the interview?
Sir, as per me, my preparation was fine because I had prepared my DAP and I had given a lot of marks. But I scored low marks in the interview. I scored around 165. Uh, so it could have probably been because I think I was a little impatient in answering the questions. And so there's nothing else I can think of with respect to the interview.
Right, right. I think somebody had pasted a question where they wanted to know about. I think there's one question which I have forwarded to you. How ma'am has prepared for GS2, especially general topics like developmental process and developmental industry.
Okay. Uh, so development process and development industry
Yes,
can can you write down this theme specifically? Which theme?
Radhakrishnan, can you respond to this? Can you be more specific with respect to your question? May I have a question how to approach CSAT exam? That's the last thing you ask a maths optional student. They always have an advantage over CSAT. You don't. I don't think her strategy would work for others, right? Radhakrishnan is saying so topics like SHG, NGO, such kind of topics.
Yes, sir. For topics like these, sir. So I highlighted all topics like these, which were these extra topics, SHGs, NGOs, disaster management. For all these topics, so for instance, SHG is a topic. So I googled about this topic. I made very preliminary notes, like 4 to 5 lines on data points, how many SHGs exist in the country, what is the impact of these SHGs on our financial inclusion, as in what is the progress that they. So I would prepare 4 to 5 lines, and then I would have this keyword named SHG in my mind whenever I was going through newspapers or current affairs magazines. So every time there was an article on SHG, I would read this article thoroughly and I would update my notes on SHG from this article. Similarly, whenever I'm reading this Vision Current Affairs magazine, say there's a new development on SHG and they've covered the topic, I will update my notes. And then I would also analyze previous year's question papers. So SHGs, they usually ask about the social impact, their financial impact. So I would see the kind of things that they're asking, and then I would prepare specific notes. As in financial impact, I will write down 2 to 3 schemes, SHG bank linkage program, or whatever is happening. So this was, like I mentioned, for topics, side topics like these, I had a very dynamic approach. I would just update my notes consistently and make a preliminary note of all of these topics in the beginning so that I have them in mind whenever I'm reading the paper or current affairs.
The other question is that how many questions did you get from related to DAF in interview and about writing hobbies in interview?
So my interview was mostly based on Punjab and IIT, which is my college of graduation. So Punjab, there were very common questions on Punjab around the stubble burning issue, terrorism in Punjab, Jallianwala Bagh issue. So I was able to answer most of these questions because I was prepared. Similarly, there were 2 to 3 questions on IIT I was able to answer. There were 1 or 2 questions on which I had said that I'm not aware. One was they asked me the difference between cooking and grilling. This was from baking as a hobby, and another was on red corridors. I do know what red corridors are, but I wasn't sure there, so I chose not to answer. Other than these 2 questions, I think I answered all.
I think there was a question. How did you prepare current affairs? I take 3 hours to read newspapers. Kindly help.
So initially when I started reading the newspapers, I also took 2 to 3 hours to read the newspaper. I think after 1 or 2 months of reading the paper, this time would come down. Also, sir, I think it is a very conscious choice to read the newspaper in 1 hour. Like if we sit with the newspaper and we we want to read it very properly, I think it is very genuine to take 2 to 3 hours to read the newspaper. But we should set a deadline for the newspaper. We should have 1 hour in mind. So this way we'll be able to select the articles that we want to read for the day. Some articles we just want to glance through and just note down 1 or 2 data points. So if we have to very consciously choose to complete the newspaper in 1 hour, and that also depends somewhere on the reading speed, which will come with time. So initially it will take 2 to 3 hours, and then it will become a conscious choice to read faster and complete it in an hour.
Another question is that, how much time were you giving for preparation in your earlier years, and were you working and preparing also, and how was it compared to later years?
So I was preparing full time in all my four attempts. I had not joined any job. Sir, yes, sir. So that is it.
Right. So while working, you have not prepared. You quit the job and then you started preparing, right?
No, sir. I at ITC was an internship which I did during my college time. So I did not sit for college placements and I did not take any job. I was preparing since my graduation.
How was your daily routine like? I think that's one of the questions that somebody has put.
So in my earlier attempts, the daily routine was very ad hoc. Generally, I would read the newspaper in the morning and then set a topic or a subject that I have to read, and I would read that topic throughout the day. Sometimes my speed would be slow, sometimes it would be faster. For this particular attempt, I was a little more disciplined in the sense that especially between prelims and mains, I would wake up and the first 1 hour of my day was dedicated to answer writing. So I would not even go brush without I had written answers for an hour. So after doing this 1 hour answer writing, only I would get up from my chair and then start my daily routine. So other than this, so I had divided the day into 2 slots. The first hour was for answer writing, and then from around 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. in the afternoon, I would read maths. Then 4 to 6, I would attempt a test for maths, a half a test, which I would practice daily. And post 6 p.m., I would do GS.
Did you follow any news analysis and compilations?
No, sir. Other than Vision Eyes, I had bought. Shunya had released 4 books for GS last year. I had bought those books, but I did not read them in entirety. For GS2, there were some portions like constitutional bodies. So I read some topics from the books very, very selectively. Other than that, Vision Eyes was my main source for current affairs or daily news. Sir, I followed Insights Current Affairs daily. So in my previous 3 attempts, I would read Insights Current Affairs daily that they post on their website, and I would make my notes from there as well. But for this attempt, since maths was consuming a lot of my time and I was focusing more on writing rather than reading, so I skipped doing that and I was just reading the compilations and just revising my notes and writing answers.
How do you make notes? How does your current affairs notes look like? How do you prepare current affairs notes?
Yes, sir. So as I said, I first read the entire main syllabus some 2 to 3 times and I noted down every keyword. Like SHGs is one keyword, NGOs is another keyword, environment, economic linkage is another keyword, federalism is a keyword. So I prepared all the keywords subject wise, GS1, GS2, GS3, GS4. Then I had these keywords in my mind. So whether I'm reading Insights Daily Current Affairs or the newspaper or a monthly compilation, I keep these keywords in my mind. And whenever I find something very useful, I go back to my notes or add these points to my notes.
Okay. Another question is, how did you stay motivated for so long during your preparation? What was driving you?
So the answer to this is extremely complex because there were a lot of factors that so there were too many lows. A lot of times I felt like giving up and I felt like I will not be able to clear this exam with my current abilities. So sir, motivation, it was a very dynamic process. So one was my family. My first 2 attempts, I was self-motivated to a large extent. The later 2 attempts, my motivation was very low. So these external factors. So one thing I started doing was from my third attempt onwards, I shared my daily plans with my younger brother. So he would keep taking updates from me whenever I was becoming too slow. He would scold me for not doing it. He would remind me about why I had started this journey. So then, secondly, I chose to stay at home these 3 years while I was preparing. I came to Delhi only for mains in my fourth attempt. So my family was a big support. My father, every day he would come back home, he would sit with me till the time he went to sleep. So he would have his evening tea with me, he would have his dinner with me. So seeing my parents' face every evening also helped me stay motivated. So there were some other factors. So sir, I had made this conscious decision to not sit for placements and come for UPSC. So this thought also would keep coming to mind about whether it was the right decision to do it. I come from a very good college. I could have secured a good placement. Why did I get stuck in this process? So those times I would remind myself about why did I take this decision. It was also a lot to do with my job satisfaction. So, sir, I would remind myself about why am I doing this. So, for instance, if I see my maid, I would see her and I would think the only difference between me and her, we are both struggling. She's also struggling with her daily chores and I'm also struggling with my daily studies. The only difference is that I have hope that I'll be able to come out of this process and also help her come out of her process. And she has no hope probably because in her mind, she will have to keep doing the same job continuously. She is not probably going to upgrade her life through. So I every time I would see her or somebody like that, I would remind myself that the difference between us is hope. And I should not give up that hope for myself as well as for these people and for my parents. So there was this dynamic set of factors I would keep reminding myself of, which helped me stay motivated.
Okay. Maths book list.
Yes, sir. So for maths, I did not really follow books. There were the four physics topics for which I followed books: statics, dynamics, fluid mechanics, and dynamics. For these four topics, I solved the books. Other than this, I relied on IMS notes and supplemented these notes with previous year's papers as well as IMS mock tests. I did not read any books.
If I'm not able to read newspapers efficiently, can I substantiate it with the monthly magazine?
Uh, uh, so it is obviously possible to do that, but I think that newspaper helps a lot for memes in the sense that it helps build an analytical ability for us. We start to look at every issue uh, with an analytical approach about why what is happening, what are the pros and cons. I think that ability really helps when we are consistently reading the newspaper. I think a lot of people are nowadays clearing the exam with very good scores even without reading the newspaper. So I would say it is a very personal choice. It is possible both ways.
Ethics, I'm finding it too difficult to find sources and materials. How to make for
Uh,
ethics? What was your approach? Source list and how was your notes made?
So, sir, Bajiram notes were my base for ethics. I had read those notes and then I started attempting the tests. Then there was this reverse engineering that I would prepare, like write down examples whenever I came across them. And sir, I generally read toppers' blogs which suggested that for every keyword in ethics, you prepare a definition and examples. I could not do that personally. One reason was also because I had consistently scored good marks in ethics, so I did not feel the need to do that. So, sir, for ethics, I believe it was mostly this that I would just write a little naturally, but beautify those answers with inserting keywords and examples in between.
How was your experience with brainstorming? How did you find the questions or evaluation? And what are the areas that we could improve with respect to brainstorming?
So with respect to brainstorming, first of all, I think the quality of questions was good in the sense that they were very analytical. One had to think before attempting the question, which is similar to the UPSC pattern of these past recent years. And sir, so I think the quality of questions was good, but one can also find quality elsewhere. I think the major differentiating factor for me with respect to brainstorming was the personal touch that I had with the mentor, specifically you. So I would, every time I wrote a test, I would come to you, you would evaluate it for me and give me feedback. So, sir, I think more than your feedback, it was also this consistent approach of having the same mentor who's consistently seeing your performance, who knows your strong and weak areas, and who's willing to give the time to help those improve those areas. So that was the differentiating factor for me with respect to brainstorming, that I was able to write and show all my answers to you and get your feedback. And then also, sir, it was this timely evaluation. Like every time I wrote a test, the evaluation would come out in 4 to 5 days. So I was in a position to analyze this test before I write my next test. So, and also show it to you. So these were the differentiating factors.
Any other questions related to preparation? I think we'll take the last 2 or 3 questions. Anybody else? Any other question? So far, nothing. There is a question which is very personal. I don't think it's something that we can respond on a public sphere. Probably you can reach out to us directly and we can respond to that. Essay paper, I think she's not very happy to guide us on essay because she has not had great outcome on essay. I think this is very common with Varun also. Varun tried everything. Even when he had rank 7, his essay was 107 or something. It was really bad. So I keep telling people that either you're good at essay or you're bad at essay. There is no in between. Reach out to us. I think we'll help out whatever way we can. Do you want to speak about essay? Is that something that you are comfortable to speak on? Essay.
Sir, I think I can just say 1 or 2 things. The essays nowadays are becoming more philosophical in nature. So I think for philosophical essays, what we need to do is that we need to break them down into a little less philosophical domain. For instance, there was this essay, "Hand that rocks the cradle rules the world." So seeing it prima facie seems a little ad hoc and we don't understand where to start. But if we break this down, say we understand this is about a woman who takes care of the child, and then we are open to interpretation. We can take any interpretation that we like. We can write on the mother's role in a child's life. Then we can divide that into various phases of the child's life. Or we can write about the role of nurturing in anybody's life, be it a country, a society, the role that nurturing plays. So I think once we are able to just highlight the theme of an essay, then it becomes like a GS topic where we just need to break it down into social, environmental themes and then write about it. But since this did not fetch me a lot of marks, I would not recommend the same strategy to everyone.
Okay. I think monthly magazine, she has already mentioned that she was following newspapers. And for current affairs magazine, she has said that she has extracted it and added it to her notes. Right. So I think we'll conclude the session out here. We have covered most of the areas. You can see Surbhi's papers on our website in IAS Parliament if you want to look at how she approached GS answers. Right. That's it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Surbhi. Thank you so much for your time. Do drop into Shankar IAS when you are in Delhi next. Right.
Yes.
We are the center. Right? All the best. Thank you, everyone.